Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman. And today we got a real treat for you. His name is Mark Hartman, and he is the Chief Sustainability Officer at the City of Phoenix in beautiful Arizona. Mark, say what's up to everybody.
Hey everyone. Nice to be here today, and thank you for inviting me.
Sure thing, sure thing. You're my first Chief Sustainability Officer. I had to get you on the show. so so you got to talk about everything sustainability in City of Phoenix. But first of all, I think the people want to know, what does a Chief Sustainability Officer do? So run us through a random Tuesday of what you do when you get to the office and then what you do all day before you go.
Well, my goal, I'm almost like a consultant to the city, and actually, no matter if you're in a business or a city, I think that's really the role, is to be a catalyst, because as society, we have a strong propensity to do the things the way we've always done them. And so my role is really just to be there to ask why. Like, why are you doing it this way? It's so fascinating to just see, people are really a strong resistance, and actually it requires a little bit of negotiation skills and things to just get people to just, start thinking outside of the box. So.
Love it, love it, love it. So I could see you around. You're in the office. You're going to everybody's door. You're sticking your head and you're saying, "Why? But I'm sure it's a little bit more complex than that. So, let's say, and I love how you put it. You're a consultant. It's not necessarily it's a input and an output. You're not turning a wrench. You're not building a widget. You're not fixing a truck. But you're coming in and correct me if I'm wrong. Like, feel free. But I would say, try to turn the ship. Not that it's going in the wrong direction, but you're saying, hey, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer. How can we be more sustainable? So what does that conversation sound like, when you're in the office, and what do those meetings sound like?
Well, quite often, I think some people are resistant to the concept of, like, oh man, sustainability, they think, oh, it's a wacko environmentalist or some of that. But actually, sustainability is just like not wasting so much in our society. Everything we do, every process we do, every way we do everything, it is just so, waste is just such a part of everything. And so it really is just actually wanting to say, no, look, I'm talking about saving money, and also don't spend our time doing things that just aren't necessary. And so it actually is as people kind of discover and come around, it actually is some pretty good support. And we have goals at the city, for example, that are, for long-term sustainability goals and even shorter ones, but I'm not the owner of them. The actual departments are. So water department around their 100-year water supply, and our public works solid waste department owns a zero waste goal. So even though I'm sustainability, they're the ones that own the goal, and they eventually will actually take on and be really passionate about those areas. But usually it takes some time for that to incubate.
Sure, I'm sure nobody likes change, right?
Um,
Yeah. So let's talk about Mark's backstory, Mark's history. So let's talk about, was 15-year-old Mark, were you the Chief Sustainability Officer, at your local high school, out of your friend group, were you the guy who was always looking to be more sustainable at a young age, or where did that, and then talk us through your career path from when you graduated high school to where you're at today.
Yeah, it's society was different. There was a lot more on conservation when I was young. Like, I'm quite old now, so in our generation, the 70s, 60s, and 70s, growing up, that it was still, all the parents had come out of the depression and all that kind of stuff. So everybody was all about saving everything and not throwing anything out. So society was more oriented that way, but we've really become much more, just go for dinner all the time and all those things that just, like, people, like, it was pretty rare for anyone I knew to go for dinner more than once a month. Like, that was just not a thing. But now it's like, it's just part of it that we all do. Just spend, and
Yeah.
so really different society. But, I think, the sustainability didn't exist, really, even when, I actually went into IT, and it was 10 years as a program analyst on mainframe computers and did all that, and then got into energy efficiency. In a utility around energy efficiency programs. So trying to, give people discounts on programmable thermostats and that kind of stuff. And it was kind of One thing that really bothered me as I did it, because we actually had, millions of dollars of budget and all this stuff. And I said, we're giving this money for people to do things that have like a 2-year payback. Why don't we just build them in when we build homes and do this? Like, it's just so frustrating. Have to give incentives to do things that are just no brainers, really. And I actually had an interview with the city of Vancouver, Vancouver, Canada, and they were just starting their sustainability department. And they said, well, what would some of the things? And I said, well, I'd really like to just have like a green building code. Like, because that'd be, there's just so many things you can do. And they said, oh, well, yeah, you could put it in the day after you got here. Like, and so just give us a list and we put it in. And so I went, wow, really? So actually, we came out with a green building code in 2007, launched, approved by the public. That was one of the most ambitious in North America, just like that, just by having somebody just go doing it. And I think a lot of things with sustainability, leading the way is actually just getting the gumption to go ahead and do the things that really make sense. And quite often you can be a leader just by doing them because everyone else is just thinking about it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, okay. So you already got cool points in my book because the city of Vancouver, love that city. Beautiful. And the green building code, like, talk us through what that looked like. Like, is it, you got to use so many pieces of XYZ when you're building a house or you're putting a building together? What is that like? Not dumb it down, but make it make sense for us mortal people.
So one thing was actually having windows that there's a rating on windows. It's called a solar heat gain coefficient. And I thought, really it's just a coating, and it actually is a very small dollar amount, like it's like $10 to add that coating on windows. So we just said, okay, that's mandatory. Like, it's like, why not? Like, and just made that part of it. So it's really no incremental cost, and the payback was pretty good. We made insulation in the attic R40 at the time. So this is 2007, so that was pretty leading at the time. Today, that is the standard, but at the time, nobody else had that. And then R20 in the walls, it's the insulation value of the walls. And then heat recovery ventilator, which is actually something that when instead of just a bathroom fans that throw air outside and are pulling it in, this actually does a heat exchange, and so those are really good for indoor air quality and things like that. So it was a pretty small incremental changes, but they were, it was really what the biggest one was probably just that air leakage. Like, we actually did some testing on homes and they just leak like a sieve. Like, most of them were like 7 or 8 air changes per hour. So if you think of a home, the volume that air changes over 7 or 8 times every hour, going out cracks and doors and windows and all those things. So we made it say mandatory. You can't be more than 5.
What? Whoa. So air changes. Let's talk about that. Is that when like all the air in your home leaves and then is replenished? That's an air change. 8 times, 5, 6, 7, 8 times.
Wow. Total volume. Yeah, wow. And it's pretty. And I'd say now the typical home is about 4 air changes per hour. But the super efficient homes, like the building code in Germany was a building code in Phoenix. Our homes would use 80% less energy. And so, but their air changes per hour are 0.75 of an air change. And ours are probably around 4 or 5 air changes per hour. So we're like 5 times higher than them for how much air leakage there is naturally within homes.
Wow, that's so interesting. So you get to the city of Vancouver, you got this do it attitude, which I like, which I appreciate. They give you this kind of I wouldn't say blank check, but this sheet of paper that's blank. It says you can create your own code. So where do you start? Like, how do you pull the certain innovative and I guess conservative techniques that are around the world and say, hey, we're going to implement this in the building code in the city of Vancouver? Like, where do you start with all that?
Well, the biggest thing is actually just to bring in, the supporters, the people who are builders and developers who are are open to that sort of thing, and really have them to say, look, practically, what is this? What's the cost? Does this make sense? And getting support from those who are doing it, whether it's practical. I mean, some things like, the supply. Like, I know when I came to Arizona and I asked about, hey, I think we should put solar heat gain coefficient on our windows. And I talked to like Anderson Window. I talked to 3 different window companies just about it. And they said, yeah, you can't get them in Arizona. Nobody buys them here. So you'd have to ship them in and it would cost you a fortune. So like, oh man, so, you do have to have things that are practical, and really work with all the stakeholders and really say, okay, what are the things and what makes the most sense? And, most people as humans, we greatly overpredict what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what can be done in 10. And if you just take incremental steps, and then you look back and go, wow, look how far we've come in 10 years. It's just complete change. And look where electric vehicles have gone in the last 10 years. It just was, they were non-existent, and now they're like everywhere. So, it
Yeah,
is real change can
that is a
happen
good
over
point.
that time period.
That is a good point. Let's say we got the TV remote, we hit it fast forward, and boom, we're 10 years from now. Like, what if we didn't change anything today? What would we have gotten right? And this isn't just City of Phoenix. This is
Mhm.
America. What would we have gotten right in regards to energy conservation, and then what will we have gotten wrong?
Well, I think looking at, we often will just look at the end cost of something like, oh, a gallon of gasoline and stuff, and even what that does, the emissions from that, but doesn't look at all the upstream work, like all the pipelines and all the cost of those pipelines. And so upstream things are really, so as you move, you start to discover and innovate as you go. That quite often, for most things as you go ahead with, that it has to be very iterative, and then you discover an innovation. Like, constraints that you have are the quote Lord of the Rings, constraints are the progenitor of innovation. So as you're constrained and you say, okay, we need to figure out a way around this, and actually those are the things that force you to innovate and think of new ways. And innovation can actually bring huge cost savings. And so it's not like you can say, here's our plan for 10 years from now. It's actually just, no, let's move. It's strategic doing. So instead of just this giant plan, you just do strategic doing, moving in the right direction, and then and change and dynamic as you go to sort of just continue to innovate.
Yeah, I like that, because when you set a 10-year plan, like, who knows what next year is going to look like? We could have COVID,
Exactly.
we could
Yeah.
have, the aliens might be in Phoenix camping out. You never know. So it's usually good, like you said, you iterate a little bit, you look up and go, hey, we're going in the right direction. And then you do it again. You look up and go, hey, we're going the right. So
Exactly.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. So let's say you're mentoring young Mark. Young Mark's 22. He's got all this energy. He's got the can-do attitude. He's ready to take on the world. What skill set would you tell young Mark to pick up to be successful at what you're doing today?
I think for certainly in the sustainability field, it has to be thinking outside the box and actually being someone that asks questions and isn't afraid to ask questions. And really, I think that's the biggest thing that can happen. Is for, I think my gifting, I think, is where I actually love, the thing I love most is coming up with ideas. Some of them aren't good, some of them are great. And so you just really say, well, how about this, and how about that, and how about, and really, because it really does require that lateral thinking. I don't know if you've heard of the black hat thinking, the 6 hats, or lateral thinking,
No.
where you can,
Yeah.
really interesting coming up with innovations. There's actually one company actually ran a big contest because they actually were trying to making ball bearings. They were actually having these ball bearings go down, but one out of every 50 boxes was just empty, like a wooden white catch, and it was empty. So they ran all these contests to all their employees and offered a big reward for anyone that could figure out what's the best way to find out if there's an empty box and we're not shipping it off empty. And so people had these scales, had all these design plans, all these engineers in the room were all scales and all the special way to figure out and to determine what. And the guy who actually won the award actually just put a fan on the side of the belt, and any boxes that were empty just blew off. So it was just, it is, sometimes it's not really complex ideas. It's actually really simple things that, we just need that room to sort of chance to where people love it, actually, if you give a puzzle or a challenge or those
Yeah.
types of things. But how often are people given that puzzle? Even people, lots of experience and knowledge, but that decisions are made and things happen, but people who have the knowledge of how to do it, they don't give a chance to solve those puzzles or come up with innovation. So that's really, that role is to turn it over to others.
Yeah. And speaking of a puzzle or a challenge, and the reason why I asked this question is because let's say there's other of your sustainability officer counterparts, and they're listening to it. So that's why I always like to ask for a story of something that went wrong under your watch. what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career. So they can potentially, if they come up across it and they'll go, oh, this is what Mark said on that podcast, here's what I can do.
Yeah, I think actually it was kind of interesting coming from City of Vancouver and coming to City of Phoenix, in the role of sustainability. So, there's certain things around reputation and things that you just kind of say, and, you got good respect and everybody knows you and they trust you. Like, even if they're not quite sure, they'll at least explore it. And then coming here, it was like, it wasn't really like, who's this guy? What's he going to do? Is he going to get us to do some weird wacko? Like, what is he? And so, and I think even as, like, for one thing, I was actually on, I really coming here, I got a lot of comment from everybody in Vancouver, do something about their heat, So I actually was talking to different consulting groups, these global groups on cool pavement and stuff like that. And so I was trying to encourage, like, talk to street transportation and say, hey, what about cool pavement? Like, what do you guys think of that? And I think this would be really great. We should pilot it here. They said, oh, we talked to the more technical people, and we tried that a few years ago. It doesn't work. Like, it all cracks. It's not very good. It just peels off. And I said, no, there's some really, it's always changing. And well, no, we don't really, and besides, we don't really have budget for that. We can't really try that. And it was just really, I tried for a long, for nothing really happening. And then I actually talked to some of my counterparts in other cities. What can we do? And we actually talked to one organization, got a funding to actually go and pay for the street transportation, a person to go with me to LA and 5 other cities who did the same thing. And actually looked at what was happening in LA around cool pavement. And
Wow.
but when they said, oh yeah, I'll come. If I get a free trip to LA, sure.
Of course, yeah.
Where they weren't willing to participate, but just that free trip and going and seeing that. And actually they went, this is really interesting. This is really good. And they came back quite excited. And then they actually then innovated even, like, for when they came back, they said, hey, I want to try this in our sprayers. And the companies that did the cool pavement said, no, you can't use that. You got to squeegee it on. And like, it took forever to put this cool pavement on because you'd squeegee it. I said, no, I'm going to try it in our sprayers. And I said, I don't know. So they came out here, they sprayed, and they're actually going 10 miles an hour, spraying on the road. And we did like 35 miles in a week. And they said, this is awesome. This is the fastest way to do it. And within that week, we then became the most cool pavement in the world, just in 1 week. So just by that, now we have over 100 miles. Now we have 100 miles of cool pavement, just by, more. And we are, our street transportation department is actually talks on conversations of cities all over the world, talking about our cool pavement program, and ASU studying, researching it fully to look at what the temperature below and at the surface and above the surface is, and how well it's working in the communities. So really interesting studying and innovating and trying new surface coatings and things. But it really just requires sometimes just people just to get out of the way the current environment and just be thinking differently.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so much of that where it's like, there's a great idea, but it's like, oh, too risky to try. We're fine doing what we're currently doing. Like, nobody's in harm's way if we just keep pouring down the regular pavement. But, like you said, you took a little trip to LA. Who doesn't want a trip to LA? And you get around it, touch it, feel it, and see some testimonials. And now look at you. You're the 1 week, you're the most cool pavement.
They took off, and I don't even have a role in that anymore. They're just going for it, and they speak at conferences and all that kind of stuff. It's all them now, and they're and they're really and they've learned a lot and are actually technical experts on cool pavement. So
that's so cool. Like, what would be, as a chief sustainability officer, what would be the biggest, like the biggest pat on the, I'm not necessarily pat on the back, like, what's a win for you? Like, would it be an instance like that where you bring in something that might work and then it actually works? Or is that kind of like how you're praised around the office, I guess?
No, I don't. I think the praise is more, that's not but it certainly is really getting other people to kind of, what I can do in a day, how much can I do in a day, versus really being an influencer and letting other people be doing these things. And so, I think even, I think when I first started talking, I came here and I started talking about zero waste, and our public works department said, "What? Like, there's always going to be lots of garbage." Like, there's just no, like, just the whole concept, if they hadn't even heard of the term zero waste. And this was about 8 years ago, but they were just like, "What? Like, this doesn't make sense." And then within a 2 years, it just sort of, everything, this too shall pass in time. They really became a leader and are now, speaking globally on circular economy and how to, really innovating in that space where, it was just compared to where they were initially. And I think it really is just being a catalyst to just ask the questions and get people excited. So if I can get let other people be successful, I mean, I think that's really where it creates change.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I had Lori Zelda on the show, and we went into details about the zero waste, the Super Bowl, like the downtown Super
Yeah,
Bowl
yeah,
experience. And she
yeah,
talked all about it. It was so cool, and just how passionate she was about it. Like, I love that people love what they're doing, and then zero waste, like, that totally helps out this, the community, society, and the universe. So
yeah.
that
I
was
think
cool to hear.
92% recycling at the Super Bowl, which is,
Yeah,
when you consider the tens of thousands of people, it's amazing they could do that.
yeah, totally, totally. So like you said before, sustainability has changed, since you were younger and now that it's 2023. But I always like to ask the question, how do you keep evolving? Like, how does Mark keep his sword sharp? How do you keep showing up year after year, better, better, and better? What's your personal and professional development regimen like?
It's really, I think one of the huge advantages, and I don't know how many other, I guess most societies have some sort of professional network. And for sustainability people, there's an urban sustainability directors network. And it has over 200 sustainability directors in it in cities. And we have, monthly, we have working groups under each topic. So if you want a working group on electric vehicles, there's a working group on equity, there's a working group on this, and you can be part of those working groups. And they actually have funding for you to fly there and all meet together and do some planning. And so we have annual meetings with really cover topics. So, and I would say that is where I have learned so much, just being together with others, and you share ideas and share things back and forth. And it's really is just being in the stream. I mean, I'm probably on about 30 different news feeds and hearing about all the innovations globally. So very rarely can you talk about something and I won't already know about it. But it is so interesting to just see where the innovation is. I mean, what they're doing. It's actually exciting for me as around the globe of how innovations that are happening.
That's so cool, and I love the communal aspect about it, because you could just sit in your office in Phoenix and kind of look on Google or a couple websites and pull your information from that. But you're talking to other sustainability directors around the country, saying, "Hey, what are you guys getting right? What are you guys doing? What have you tried that hasn't worked? Like, where, can you guys poke holes in this plan for me?" So I like how there's a network for, and which is so cool about a lot of things public works, is that there's usually a pocket somewhere in the country that you can find all your people. You can find the wastewater, you can find the water, you can find the streets, you can find the sustainability.
Yeah.
And then you guys can talk about the stuff that you're seeing out there and then share knowledge, because honestly, nobody's really your competition, so it
Yeah,
makes
no,
sense.
exactly.
What would you say is the biggest misconception about your position? What like if I were to ask somebody that knows you but they don't work with you, like, what does Mark do all day as a chief sustainability officer? Like, what does he do? What would they get totally wrong in answering that question?
Well, I think it's, the traditional client, of irrational approach to environmentalism. Like, I think that they think that, well, like, actually I had I won't say the company name, but they actually, they weren't sharing some data with us. So they're like, what? And so I said, "Oh, phone, I'll give them a call." I called them and I says, "Well, I know what you're like and you're kind, you want to, and I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean my kind?" Like, and it's like, "Yeah, you guys just want to green the whole planet and you want to do all this stuff." Well, I'm like, "What? Like, where's this?" And just it really is. But what I'm talking about is, hey, it's actually a very practical, that actually what we want to do is just not waste so much, actually, where it improves the quality of life for everyone, not just some neighborhoods, but for everyone, and making nature better off. Like, is it a given that, oh, sorry, humans are on the planet, sorry, nature, you got the short end of the stick on that? or can we, with all our science and ingenuity and cleverness, actually make nature better off? Like, that's the challenge, really. Like, can we make it thrive at the same time we're also thriving? Like, and I think that's the question. And I think if we're asking that question, like, what's the way to do this without, polluting everything around us? Is there a way to do it? Like, just put it out there that maybe there's a possibility. So.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. I can see that when you walk in the room, everybody goes, "Oh, now we got to think green, like we got to hug the trees and do that and that." But as you're saying, like, you're on our team, like you want to
Yeah.
help save money, which helps the city, the constituents out. And it also helps the city out. Like if you can buy more budget or you can get yourself more budget, like who wouldn't want that? So I get it. Like I get what you're up against for sure, especially in this day and age. If you were commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is going to go in the most trafficked area of Phoenix, what ask of your community in regards to sustainability would you put on this billboard?
I think, because so many people, I mean, when we ask questions of the community, most people, we ask about different things about walking and biking and all this. We typically got 85-90% of people go like, yeah, I support that. Yeah, I support that. Like really high support for, things that are all like, everybody loves them. But we really don't see people doing or advocating for those things. So I think the most significant thing people could do is actually organize people in your community to improve it. Like I think for me, improve and actually, as you're improving it, you're getting to know one another. Like I think the most important aspect above all else is actually improve community cohesion. Like if we actually know who our neighbors are and then we start helping one another, start doing those things, we actually create, we'll do positive things for the environment around us. And then, then we agree, hey, let's pick up all the litter in this park, or let's do those things together that activate people in a community to go and do something. To build community, I think is the most important thing we as people can do.
Sure. And to all the listeners out there, what can we do is just like in our own home, because we might not be in a company of 50, 500 people, but we have a family of 4 or 5, right? And we consume so much and we want to be sustainable. So what will be maybe one tip or trick that we can do to, I guess, help alleviate, some of the waste that we have, or just to be more sustainable?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's limited. I want to give the caveat that it is hard sometimes. Like, I don't think that we should ask people to say, oh, you need to drive 10 miles to drop off all your, this or that. Like, just to do, like, it has to be made easy for people. So part of it is that there needs to be the things in place. Like for a city that doesn't offer recycling, and there are ones even in our region that don't offer recycling, that it's like, should I ask them to drive across town to drop it off? Like, it's like, no, actually, I think it should make it easy for people to do those things. But I think the most practical thing I think that people could do, I would say, certainly on the sustainability front, would just be get an energy audit of your home. I think for APS and SRP are 2 utilities here. And I think most utilities around the US, I think it's like a $99 energy audit. You could have someone kind of look at what are the things in your home that you could do to how they do a blower door test to see how airtight it is. Back to those air changes per hour. And they can do certain things depending on sort of what you kind of would estimate would be the big issues in your home. And they'll be able to really give you some advice. And it's, when you do things that save money, they'll actually save for like the next 5 or 10 years. So it can actually be pretty significant. So I would say that's probably the biggest area.
Gotcha. Energy audit. I like that. I just like the concept of it. Sometimes we need to just stop and pause and audit what we're doing, is make sure we're doing the right thing, or if we could do a little bit more efficiently. So I like that. All right, Mark, let's say I'm coming to Phoenix and I text you ahead of time and I say, hey, Mark, give me the spot where I can get the best burger in Phoenix. Where are you going to send me?
Well, I'll tell you, 8 years ago, you couldn't find a spot downtown. There was nothing. It was just like really bad. But it has so changed. I bet there's over 100 restaurants in the downtown area now. Like, it is just I can't believe how much it's changed. But it's a great place called The Big, right downtown. Yeah. Really good. I don't know if you've been there or not, but yeah, great. Yeah. Yeah, they have great burgers as well as lots of other great food, and it's a little more upscale. I mean, I wasn't going to say the Whataburgers and the Five
Yeah.
Guys, that kind of thing, like I could, but
Yeah.
a lot of those are kind of a certain niche market. But I think if you want a sort
Yeah.
of a more upscale type burger, then yeah, you
I
have to go
like it.
somewhere like the Big. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. You're still not going to spend more than 35, $40, so you'll be all right.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, thank you for hopping on the show. I always like to leave an opportunity or a space for you to thank mentors that you had along your journey, and then offer up a word of inspiration and motivation to your fellow sustainability counterparts.
My mentors, as I mentioned, are certainly Urban Assembly Directors Network, like so many great people and leaders of cities in LA and San Francisco and New York and Chicago, and just working with those other cities has been it's just so inspiring to hear what other people are doing, that actually it's great for me. And I think my word of encouragement is that, adversity has its own gifts, that, to just be thinking pleasure all the time, and just what if there's things going wrong, that hey, there's some real gifts in that. Like it's like, okay, this is a chance to reformat, redo, rethink. And so I think really, I'd say adversity is the midwife of resilience. You can really build character as you kind of having some of these adverse things. Like I think for people here in the desert, that people live where you and I do, we are desert adapted. The trees are desert adapted, but so are we. We've learned how to be desert people. We kind of identify with that. And so it's part of our DNA. Like we just think that way. It's even though like nobody else can imagine what it's like being here today at 116 degrees, but we can. We go like, well, no problem. I still ride my scooter home. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty, I think just embrace adversity, I think is an opportunity.
Love it. Love it. All right, Mark. Well, again, thank you for hopping on the show. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge, or wealth of information and knowledge with us. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody. And then also, if you know somebody who might want to be more sustainable, share this with somebody in public works. Mark, before we get out of here, any final words?
No, thanks. Great to be on here. And hey, everyone, thanks a lot.
For sure. All right, Mark, thanks for hopping on the show. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for tuning in.